When most people picture ancient battles, they imagine legions with shields locked in formation, marching with perfect discipline. But Rome's greatest victories didn't just happen on open ground. Many were won at the gates of fortified cities, places protected by high walls, towers, and stubborn defenders who refused to surrender. That's where Rome unleashed two of its most powerful siege machines, the Ballista and the Onager. These weren't just weapons, they were engineering wonders that helped shape the ancient world. Let's step inside the mechanics, strategy, and battlefield impact of these legendary engines. The Romans were practical, methodical, and relentless. When a city stood in their way, they didn't charge blindly, they planned, they built ramps, trenches, palisades, and siege towers. And at the heart of these operations were the torsion-powered engines, the Ballista and Onager, designed to break the resolve and the walls of enemy strongholds. Both machines relied on the same basic principle, storing energy in twisted ropes made from sinew or hair, then releasing it all at once to hurl a projectile with incredible force, but they filled very different roles on the battlefield. Think of the Ballista as a crossbow scaled up to terrifying proportions. It wasn't just about brute force, it was about accuracy, making it the go-to engine when Roman commanders needed to pick off enemy targets with near-surgical precision. So, the Ballista used two torsion springs, these bundles of tightly wound sinew, each one driving a long wooden arm. A winch would pull back a central slider that held a bolt or sometimes even a stone, and then, when fired, both arms whipped forward at the same time, launching the projectile at really high velocity. The result? Well, you got a weapon capable of shooting bolts over 400 meters, penetrating shields, armor, and even wooden defenses, and launching stones heavy enough to damage battlements. The versatility made the Ballista invaluable during long sieges. While primarily a siege engine, the Ballista sometimes appeared in open-field battles too. Caesar famously used smaller ballistae, scorpiones, mounted on artillery carts to support infantry formations. They acted like ancient sharpshooters, picking off officers' cavalry and exposed archers from shocking distances. But, during sieges, their true strength shone. Roman engineers placed them on raised platforms, behind barricades or atop siege towers, giving them clean lines of fire deep into a city's defenses. In psychological terms, a well-placed ballista bolt could, demoralize defenders instantly. Few things crush morale like watching a commander pierced through from hundreds of meters away by a weapon you just can't outrun. If the Ballista was the sniper rifle of Roman artillery, then the Onager was definitely the sledgehammer. Introduced later in the Empire, the Onager was a single-armed torsion catapult meant for one thing: to break walls and batter cities into submission. The Onager featured a massive frame anchored firmly to the ground, a vertical torsion bundle powering a single throwing arm, and a sling at the end of that arm to hold stones. When released, the arm would whip upward with explosive force, hurling a heavy stone in a high arc toward the target. The recoil was so violent that ancient writers compared the machine to a wild donkey bucking its legs, giving it the name Onager, which is Latin for wild ass. This machine loved its heavy projectiles, 50 to 100-pound stones crafted for maximum impact, incendiary pots filled with burning pitch or oil, and even carcass projectiles were used to spread disease and, honestly, to sow terror. When required, the Romans even filled stones with lime dust, a choking irritant that created clouds of burning powder on impact. So, why was the Onager just perfect for sieges? Well, honestly, it provided what ancient armies needed most when they were attacking walls: that raw, wall-cracking power. Its high-arching shots let it, smash parapets from above, collapse rooftops, destroy defensive towers, and even, create breaches in masonry walls. Defenders would often try to reinforce their walls with sandbags or wood, But, honestly, repeated Onager fire could reduce pretty much any structure to rubble if it was given enough time. The genius of Roman artillery wasn't just in the machines, it was really in the organization behind them. Each legion actually maintained its own corps of engineers, artillery crews, carpenters, and stonecutters. They carried prefabricated parts for siege engines on campaign, which meant they could assemble ballistae and onagers quickly whenever a siege began. Everything was standardized and logged, from the size of bolts to the thickness of torsion springs. This efficiency meant Rome could maintain a level of siege pressure unmatched by its enemies. Before Rome stormed a city, artillery softened everything. Towers toppled, ramparts crumbled, defenders were cut down on the walls, and, supplies and morale just dwindled. When the final assault came, defenders were often exhausted and terrified. Many surrendered before the last wall even collapsed. That's the real power of Roman siege engines, not just the physical destruction they caused, but the psychological crushing of hope. The ballista and onager weren't just machines, they were statements of Roman power, precision and force working together to bend the world to the empire's will. These engines helped Rome conquer cities that once seemed, honestly, impregnable, carving its legacy into the stones of 1,000 fallen walls.